We're going to begin with a little meditation. And sit comfortably, relax your body, relax your mind. Remind yourself that everything is okay. And even if it doesn't seem okay conventionally, and you can't meditate on emptiness about it, that ultimately it's impermanent and empty, think, this is my way of practicing Tonglen. I'm going to experience these problems so that others don't have to experience them. And put your attention on your respiration. Place your attention there. Your attention to your mental consciousness and think, whatever time I have left to live in this life of leisure and endowment, which is so incredibly precious, so possibly meaningful, if I use it correctly, but difficult to obtain. Whatever time I have left is quickly decaying. I'm definitely going to die. At the time of death, generally, the earth element will absorb first the form aggregate. So imagine yourself, whether you're in whatever context, meditating in isolation, slowly passing away, or in a bed, perhaps, friends and family around. You yourself are able to recognize some inner signs, others are able to tell, and you can tell also some outer signs. As the earth element absorbs, your body becomes more sunken, like the look of a corpse. The skin loses its buoyancy. The fullness of the body seems to diminish. Mere like basic wisdom diminishes, aggregate of form. And the eye faculty begins to be withdrawn so that one has difficulty in recognizing shapes, colors. The hue of the body changes, looks more sallow. And to your mental consciousness, there's the appearance of wavering light, like a mirage. See if you can duplicate that. Let go of other thoughts, right at your heart. A subtler mind here. Just see if you note, if you can simulate that, because it's not, we can't cause it to happen, the airs to absorb yet. The earth element is absorbing, and think the water element is going to be of greater efficacy for some time. So we say that the earth element is dissolving into the water element. With this mind of death, rather than worrying, see if you can use it to meditate on emptiness, because at the end of this absorption, at the clear light of death, there will arise a vacuity that we can begin to train ourselves to recognize as the meaning of emptiness. So with this subtle mind, although there is the appearance, first of all, to it of this mirage, you can use this mind to meditate on emptiness. The self that is worried about dying, the self that's worried about many things right now, happiness, job, friendship, comfort, fame, and so forth. This I does not exist the way that my mind conceives of it whatsoever. There's no I existing from my own side, from the side of the aggregates. It can't be found anywhere. Why? Why is the I empty of existing in a true, findable, inherent way? Because the mind, the I, is a dependent arising, like all other phenomena. It exists merely as an imputation upon a basis of designation, the aggregates. Having recognized the I, see if you can understand its non-existence, this recognizing the object of negation, the appearance of a truly existent I, the I that is grasped by the conception, the wrong view of the transitory collection. That I does not exist whatsoever. And what appears to your mind, if you meditate on that, is a vacuity that has been induced by this wisdom consciousness. Now, over time, the water element now begins to recede, to diminish in strength. It's said to dissolve into the fire element. The feeling aggregate, the aggregate of feeling, absorbs. The ear faculty rather, so that the ear is not able to hear sounds. Your consciousness is not able to discern sounds correctly. The basic wisdom of equality. As an outer sign, the fluidity of the body begins to diminish. For instance, the lubrication of the eyes, the mouth begins to dry. And to your mental consciousness, there appears the sight of smoke, billowing smoke as though within a smoke-filled room. Think the earth element just recently absorbed, dissolved. Now the water element is dissolving. The fire element will be next. What I am observing is a sign of the diminishing of the water element and the ascendancy of the fire element, this vision of smoke. At the time of death, when the clear light appears, I want to recognize that. I must recognize that. I must remember this meditation on emptiness and recognize that as the meaning of emptiness. So use this slightly more quieted mind now, rather than being fearful or desirous to remain here. Think, I'm going to use this to prepare for the final death. I'm going to use this to meditate on emptiness. So again, think, in this case, the aggregates, the 5 aggregates that are the basis of my imputing the I, also are empty of true existence. My body, feelings, discriminations, compositional factors, consciousness. The body, for instance, appears to be, to my mind, as something homogeneous and real, existing from its own side. But the only body that does exist is the merely imputed body. The body is not truly existent. All phenomena are not truly existent because the body, all phenomena, are dependent arisings, merely imputed on the basis of designation by a consciousness. No real body existing from its own side. No phenomena existing from its own side. Ideally, what appears to your mental consciousness now is no longer the smoke vision, smoke-like vision, but your consciousness now taking into mind emptiness, just what appears, vacuity, that you understand to mean the meaning of non-true existence of all phenomena. As time goes on, the fire element will absorb into the air element, air constituent if you want. At this time, the aggregate of discrimination absorbs, the basic wisdom of individual analysis, the nose faculty, the ability to perceive odors, as the heat absorbs from the body, if one is to have an upper rebirth, it will generally begin to leave the feet first toward the heart chakra. Later, while the head is still warm, Later the head becomes cool and the heat congregates at the heart. Now the digestion begins to stop. Other processes in the body that depend upon heat begin to stop as the fire element absorbs. To our consciousness, there appears this firefly, or like sparks of fire in an empty space, very, very subtle. I think just previous to this, the water element absorbed, and I had the smoke vision. Now I have the vision of fire absorbing into air. Next, the air element will absorb into consciousness, and I will have the burning, dying butter lamp appearance. This is leading me to the time of death. I must recognize that final clear light as the meaning of emptiness. To do so, I have to be mindful through this process, carry on the mindfulness of emptiness. So I'm going to use this occasion now to meditate again on emptiness. I think all the individuals you know, friends, enemies, and strangers, that have some real, seemingly real quality, findable quality to them, they're all empty of being truly existent. They exist merely as imputations of friend, enemy, and stranger, as person, mom, dad, lover, enemy, problem. Just like our own self, we recognize is merely imputed, all living beings are mere dependent arisings. Now after the fire element is absorbed, in the air element, the wind element or wind constituent absorbs into consciousness. The compositional factors aggregate also absorbs all of the gross mental factors. The wisdom of accomplishment, the basic wisdom of accomplishing activities diminishes and absorbs. One no longer has a sense of the goal to attain and so forth. One is very nearing the subtler stages of mind. The tongue faculty absorbs. The tongue thickens, becomes blue. Difficult, if at all, to utter sounds. The body faculty absorbs from all of the places of the body that usually pervades all of the body. The wind that supports it absorbs. One no longer can even feel roughness or smoothness. And to your consciousness there appears the dying butter lamp-like appearance. Let go of all other thoughts right now and try to simulate this. I think just previous to this, the fire element absorbed, and I had the spark-like vision. Next, the 80 indicative conceptions will absorb, and I'll have a further refinement of this vision. This is leading me inexorably to the clear light of death. At that point, I want to be able to recognize that clear light as the meaning of emptiness. So I'm going to use this situation to meditate on emptiness. Think all of the aggregates of all of the living beings that we just meditated on previously as being empty, the emptiness of persons. All phenomena, their aggregates, other phenomena, exist merely as imputations. It's the only kind of existence that they have. There are appearances due to karma, but there's nothing findable from the side of the object the way that the mind grasps. The self, all phenomena are empty of true existence because they're dependent arisings. They can't be found within the basis of designation. They exist merely as names, concepts. So using that mind that previously, just a moment before, had the vision of a dying butter lamp, use this to meditate on the meaning of emptiness. To your mind, just a vacuity appears that is the meaning that signifies that there are no truly existent phenomena. The object, the grasped object, conceived object of our innate ego-grasping, inherently existent phenomena, do not exist at all. Now the 80 indicative conceptions, even more subtle states of mind than the mental factors, absorb. The consciousness aggregate and the wisdom of Dharmadhatu, basic wisdom of Dharmadhatu, also absorb. Again, there's the appearance to the mind of a dying butter lamp. I think previously to this, the air element absorbed when I had the same vision, similar vision. Next will be the white appearance. I must prepare for that. The subtle minds. I'm heading toward the clear light of death. I must use this situation to meditate on emptiness. So think all phenomena, although they appear to my eyes, my ears, previously when I was alive, my nose, my tongue, my body consciousness, even to my mental consciousness, appeared to be so real and findable. Phenomena exist merely as names on a conventional level to the obscured mind. The truth's only for the obscured mind. They do not exist truly the way that they appear because they're dependent arisings. The state of death does not truly exist. It's just an imputation. Now as the winds, having absorbed to the right and left nadis, the winds begin to ascend from the level of the heart upward to the crown chakra, the upper winds, opening the crown chakra. The white element there begins to descend as the knot of the crown chakra is loosened. And we experience the dawning of the white appearance. Empty. All the gross conceptual minds and the 80 indicative conceptions have absorbed. There's no conceptualizing minds any longer, no thought of I or activities to be achieved. But there can be a remembering consciousness of emptiness. During this practice, we try to imagine we have just finished the burning butter lamp vision. Next will be the red appearance, red increase. I must remember emptiness at the time of death, the clear light of death. So the aspect of this mind, like a vast, clear space, sky, filled with the vibration of moonlight, doesn't appear from outside. It's a self-appearance to our mind. This appearance does not truly exist. What my mind may be grasping, the white color, use that to cue, to remind yourself of the meaning of emptiness. All appearances are merely that. They have no inherent existence, no true existence from their own side. Then as the winds in the left and right nadis below the heart descend and enter into the lowest chakras, nadis, opening the lowest, the jewel and secret place chakras. They begin to ascend up to the navel, opening up the knot at the navel, and the red element there ascends toward the heart, and we begin to see a change. The appearance to our mind now, rather than white appearance, is a more subtle vacuity, as though pervaded by copper-red vibration of sunlight. We've just experienced the white appearance. The black near attainment is coming. This red increase is a sense of greater vacuity. I must remember emptiness at the time of the clear light of death. So think, even this appearance is not truly existent. There is no truly existent copper-red color. Training this way in the generation stage can leave the imprint without conceptualizing this, merely by recalling the meaning of emptiness, can induce the remembering consciousness of emptiness, all a vacuity, the meaning of which is emptiness. The white and red elements that have just descended and ascended to the heart chakra, they come closer together as the chakra at the heart, the six-fold knot there, 3 from the right channel, 3 from the left, they become loosened. The white and red elements that have met there absorb into the white and red elements that were at the heart chakra, and the airs begin to absorb from the top and the bottom into the indestructible drop at the heart, into the subtlemost wind there. And first the appearance of red begins to diminish. I have the appearance as though the sky at dusk becoming more and more dark. Still mindfulness. In fact, we recognize at this point, as the red increase is just finished, clear light is about to dawn, we will have a moment soon where there'll be no mindfulness. So I must meditate on emptiness. Use these last moments as the mind still has the faculty of mindfulness. This blackness appearing to my mind does not exist inherently. It's a mere appearance. I impute it due to karma. Its existence is merely imputed. It's not truly existent. Like the self, like the aggregates, like other people, like all phenomena. Unfindable if sought. Whatever sense of vacuity begins to diminish as the second part of the black near attainment dawns. We lose our mindfulness as though falling into deep sleep or a faint. All the airs absorbing into the indestructible drop at the heart. And then with this slight movement, there dawns the most subtle mind, manifests the most subtle mind of clear light. Right at your heart chakra, imagine. Vast, clear vacuity, no conceptualizing minds, no distractions, no sense of I. Likened to the appearance of the autumn sky at dawn, before the sun has risen enough to cause a reddish vibration in the sky, the clear light of dawn. There's no dust particles in the air, no clouds in the autumn. As though you could see forever. Due to the force of having meditated serially in each of these stages on emptiness, your mind now recognizes this spaciousness, this vacuity, as the meaning of emptiness. All phenomena are not truly existent, not verbalized at this stage. There's no conceptualizing mind, but just by the force of mindfulness. Unifying the mother clear light, the clear light of death, with the sun clear light, the clear light that we've tried to cultivate in meditative equipoise during the waking state. And think how incredible it would be if I could, through the force of my practice this lifetime, at the time of death, actually look forward to this process, rather than to be fearful and grasping. So for that purpose, in order to cultivate my mind, in order to attain enlightenment for the sake of all living beings, all mother sentient beings, I'm going to participate in the class tonight on death, intermediate state, and rebirth. Listening, contemplating, meditating, questioning, for the sake of all living beings, so that I can quickly attain enlightenment for their sake, spontaneously, effortlessly work for their benefit. And then bring your attention back to the present. Well, you've brought your rabbit. Mm-hmm. What's your rabbit's name? Dharmakaya? Or Dromakaya? Dharmakaya. I think I said Dromakaya. How was your meditation? Is it okay? Dave.
Clear light, about death. You described it as a clear autumn moon, at the dawn of a clear autumn day, before the sun comes up or rises and it becomes orange. Am I envisioning a bluish tint?
Remember, I mentioned a couple times, it's not talking about what's behind.
You know, what we talk about the sky. Actually, at dawn, the sky hasn't necessarily, just the first dawn, the clear light, there may be the sense behind of blue, I'm not sure, but here we're talking about what's in the intermediate area before you, as though there's a total transparency. The dust is settled, there are no clouds, there's no vapor in the air. Hopefully the birds are still asleep. No fog, no smog. And it's that sense of total transparency and non-obstructiveness. We're not talking about the blueness of the sky. It's not a white light. It's a clear light. So clear like crystal, you know, like the sense of vacuity. So this can give us, maybe when we're trying to simulate, even though we may not have much of an understanding of emptiness, if we can simulate, even pretend we're meditating on emptiness, what should be appearing to our mind is a vacuity. So it doesn't necessarily have the appearance of any physical form or color. Emptiness doesn't have a shape or form or color. But here the mind is called clear light because it has a transparency, and what is appearing to the mind is this sense of vacuity. You know what I mean? Vacuous, empty. Emptiness is appearing. Now, this is not necessarily the meaning of emptiness. There are different kinds of empty, like the sky that's empty, or the empty that appears to the mind at this point doesn't necessarily qualify as emptiness. The meaning of emptiness, shunyata. Shunyata is a object that has to be known through wisdom. But this appearance can arise to ordinary beings when they die, this appearance of clear light, this kind of vacuous nature. But the appearance is almost said to be almost similar to the appearance of emptiness. It's just a matter of what's recognized by that consciousness that's apprehending this appearance. So we try to bring to this experience at the clear light of death the remembering consciousness, the mindfulness that we've experienced very in close proximity to this. The meditation on emptiness that we have, while the mind was still a little bit gross, while the elements were absorbing, we tried to keep the mindfulness of emptiness. And of course, to try to meditate for the first time on emptiness at the time of death, maybe there's not going to be much experience. You don't have anyone to ask about it at that time. So that's why we try to meditate on emptiness in our meditation session. And then when we do imagine the death evolution, either in a tantric sadhana or in the Lan Rim, when we meditate on this, we can use each of those stages to meditate on emptiness. And the mindfulness that is, the continuity of mindfulness can continue. So there will be a break in the mindfulness. At what point? Where will there be a break in the mindfulness? At each of those visions? We just said in the end of the black near attainment, right? There's a point when when there's no longer mindfulness, as though the mind is swooning in fainting. So at that point, that black near, the second part of the black near attainment, the yogis and yoginis, actually, it's not as though they try to avoid that or speed through that. That will provide a greater contrast when the clear light appears, a subtle clear light of mind, and one can be aware of that. Oftentimes, for ordinary beings, the clear light of death, this gross, we say this clear light of death, this occurs, but it is not recognized. It's not ascertained. It's as though we're not paying attention to it. So for an ordinary being, there's no special benefit from that. But for a yogi or yogini who can graft to that, to recognize that vacuum, not only to be aware of it, but to be aware that this is the meaning of emptiness, that's very, 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 very beneficial. So also the yogis and yoginis, not only in meditative session when they meditate on the generation stage, but later when they go to sleep, when they're beginning to practice the completion stage, and they can cause the airs to absorb in the central channel and try to observe that, then at the time of sleep, as the earth element absorbs as you're lying down, you can be aware of that and meditate on emptiness. And as the water element absorbs and the fire element absorbs, you can meditate on emptiness until the clear light of sleep. There will be a clear light time there that takes place due to karma also. And you can use that to meditate on emptiness. And in Tantra, the bliss and emptiness. Okay. So this meditation is very, very useful. Anyone have any questions? You're all looking, oh, that's good. Some people are looking at their books frantically. Yeah. Thea.
I have two questions, George, that I've been thinking about. Maybe I'll state both questions and then you can...
We keep saying this.
What would be the easiest? Well, okay. The first one is throwing karma. How does that fit into this process that we've just gone through? Where would a lot of these stronger emotions be triggered through this process?
So throwing karma and strong emotions, do you see some connection? What does throwing karma mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Karma that is has been sufficiently strong to be able to have its effect. The effect of that throwing karma is to give a efficacy to your next birth, right? To throw you or propel you into the next birth. And usually we say in the Lan Rim that the throwing karma, not every karma that you create creates throwing karma. Usually we have to have a path, a complete path of action, either path of non-virtue, like we call the 10 non-virtuous paths of action. Usually you don't always, remember we've said many times, they don't always say, we just say the 10 non-virtues. But actually a path of action, one of the implications is there has to be all of these parts. There has to be an object, a recognition, and a motivation and an action and a completion of the action, for that action to have a strong enough effect to bring about to propel us into a future life. Generally, there can be different kinds of results of karma. One of them is the ability to propel us into another life. What are the other, Mark, do you know back there, what the other, how many effects of karma are there usually? Usually 4, okay. How many are there? Okay. How many? So what are they? We just mentioned one, right? The throwing, yeah.
Environmental.
Environmental.
The propensity, karmic propensity.
Karmic propensity.
The karma to have the instinct to keep from.
So what are they called? What are these other 2 effects called? The results, similar to the
Cause as.
an action means that, say, for instance, if you've killed, you'll have the propensity to kill again, or if you've gotten angry, you'll have the propensity to get angry again. And the effect or result similar to the cause as an experience, meaning that if you've killed, you'll have the experience of being killed, and so forth. So one of them is called the maturation result. That's what we're calling the thrown result. Maturation, full maturation. Although all of them in a sense are the maturation of certain karma, the full maturation of a path of action is to throw us into a particular realm. So that throwing karma is while we're approaching death, when we're, while our mind is still alive, the links of craving, grasping, and becoming, the subtle minds at the time of death, is craving and grasping, and becoming, which is the ripening of karma, they haven't yet happened. So they'll be happening somewhere in this time when we still have conceptualizing mind. The mind will be causing, by craving and grasping, causing various karmic seeds that have already been deposited on our mind stream, throwing karma, seeds that were the maturation, seeds of maturation result. Some of them are going to be greater than others, even before the time of death. Maybe even our death mind is not even strong enough to ripen some to exceed those. So there might be some that are just so strong. What could be an example of that? Oh, yeah. 5 actions of immediate retribution, or what do they sometimes call the 5 heinous crimes. It's not literal 5 heinous crimes. It means like killing your mother or father and things like that. So even that action can be so strong that whatever ordinary minds that you have at the time of death may not be able to cause other seeds to excel them. So without any interruption, one is born in the hells. Okay, here's a question. Without interruption, does that mean that you're not born in the bardo? If you're born as a result of the 5, because they're called 5 actions of immediate retribution. What do you think, Fred? Okay. That's what you believe. Is that Mark? What do you think? You agree with it?
I was just going to ask, if, for example, being like in hospice, for example, and you talk with someone as they're dying and asking them, do you regret anything you've done in your life? And say someone has done a really awful crime like murder or rape, how would the energy of developing regret at the time of death kind of...
definitely help, I think. Definitely. That's one of what we try to apply to 5 forces.
Even in terms of the 5 heinous crimes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, from the point of view of
Mahayana, there's no negative action that can't be purified, especially if one had a sense of bodhicitta. These 5 actions of immediate retribution are generally if you haven't realized emptiness, for instance, and so forth. Like, for instance, Ajatashatru, the son of King Bimbisara, right, Venerable? He had committed all 5 of the actions of immediate retribution, but when during that lifetime he became an arhat, so he didn't have to experience the result of that. These are, for ordinary beings, if you haven't realized emptiness and so forth, and if you take rebirth for an ordinary being, they're sort of almost impossible to, from the Hinayana point of view, almost impossible to purify. From the Mahayana point of view, with the sense of bodhicitta, and it's also with the realization of understanding of emptiness, they can be purified, but you have to purify them through the 4 opponent forces. So regret is a very important aspect there.
I guess that's what I was asking, just regret.
Regret should, I mean, it depends on if you killed if you killed your mom and dad, or your mom or your dad, that's going to be even heavier. So it's hard at that time, if you haven't regretted during your lifetime. It's not going to be. Some other pujas we should do. But what were we saying? Dave, you were going to answer.
Yes, would an individual not be born in the bardo?
Yeah.
Instead of, no?
If someone's going to be born in hell,
As a result of the 5 actions of immediate retribution, would they skip the bardo because they're called actions of immediate retribution? Frank said yes. They go directly to hell. They do not pass bardo. Do not collect $500 or whatever. And you say, you agree? They're reborn and they have to pass through the bardo. They have to pass. So he says they have to pass through. So should we make this a democracy and vote? This is not, whether we vote or not, this is not going to change the matter. This is the American ideal. From the point of view of our text, what does our text say? I think Dave must have read ahead. He's been closer to university education than some of you guys. You've been reading you've been reading your programming handbooks and stuff like that, and construction handbooks. So you do, other than rebirth in the formless realm, you have to pass through the bardo. So even if you're born in hell, you have to pass through the bardo. And the bardo being will have a body similar to the hell body, sort of kind of blackish, kind of, as that sometimes says in the text, like a burnt log, color of burnt log. So you can, clairvoyance can actually tell from the appearance of the bardo body where that person is most likely going to be reborn unless something changes. Okay. Clairvoyance, I think. People who, from a perspective of the spiritual path, have this lifetime cultivated calm abiding and special insight and developed clairvoyance, say divine eye, or people that have a residue of that from past lifetimes, or born with some kind of, like, I don't know, Edgar, you could say Edgar Casey or someone like that. I don't know if they actually did, but it seems like maybe some people do have some ability to be able to foretell something in the future, in the past, to see auras and pretas and bardo beings. From a Buddhist perspective, if it's not something that you can bring up with control, it can be useful if you use it, but in the right way. But it's also, it's like I've said before, it's like being the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the mind. You have all these powers, but if you don't use them for the right purpose, you might become governor of California. I don't know how that analogy works. Anyway, yeah, done.
After you, in Black Entertainment, you sort of swoon and lose mindfulness, you said at that
yes,
point.
the second part of that.
Yeah. When you come out of that and come into the clear light of death, does mindfulness or remembering consciousness come back to you to meditate on?
Yes, because you can be, ordinarily you can have mindfulness at that time. Usually the 5 omnipresent mental factors will be present even in these subtle minds, but they may not be very strong. So you don't necessarily pay attention to this mind. So an ordinary person, it says in our text and other texts, an ordinary person, although the clear light appears, the subjective aspect of the mind, the knowing, doesn't necessarily pay attention to that. So it becomes kind of like what we call inattentive perception. But even the yogis or yoginis who can perceive, can be aware of that, can ascertain that, that doesn't necessarily mean they're ascertaining emptiness, because that appearance is not the appearance of emptiness. Emptiness appears due to analysis through wisdom or through cultivating a remembering consciousness of that. Okay? Venerable.
Indicative conceptions. I think I'd asked you last week, firstly, if an arhat would have, you said I had to think about it, so I've been thinking about it a little bit.
What did you
So I didn't come up with anything great, but I had a question that came maybe before
But
that.
something will be a bit good. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I was thinking, if you've done, you know, a lot of purification, or you're on some higher level of the path due to purification, when you're actually purifying, would you say, because these are all like more gross winds, the indicative, would you,
I think, you know,
do the winds become less gross when you purify, when you do purification?
do the winds become less gross?
Until you eventually...
What do you mean by purification?
Well, I'm wondering when we actually purify,
Purify what?
when we do any purification practice, or, you know, Vajrasattva,
So what are we doing? I don't know.
It may be, there are different kinds of things you could be doing. Mostly what you're doing is you're causing the efficacy of the karmic seeds that have been imprinted, we could say, on your consciousness. That's a way of talking. Say, on the karmic seeds that are part of your continuum have a certain efficacy to bring results. Some of them have the efficacy to throw us, to have different kinds of experiences in the future. Some of them can bring about samsaric happiness. Some of them bring about samsaric suffering. So feeling regret about the non-virtue we've created can cause, and applying the other opponent forces, can cause the karmic seeds similar to that to diminish in their efficacy, or to be eventually extinguished, to be made so impotent that they don't give any result whatsoever. Even the karmic seed that might have thrown you into the hell realm as a result of having killed your mother or father, even one of the 5 actions of immediate retribution. Generally in the Hinayana, it doesn't appear that it mentions particular methods to purify those. It sounds like if you've done those, it's curtains, you know. But even in the Hinayana Sutras, it's mentioned that Ajatashatru, who committed these 5 actions of immediate retribution, he did them all. He was able to attain arhatship, so he wasn't born in the hells. Because if you could an arhat be born in hell? An arhat? Let's say that life, when they attain arhatship, after that life, can they be born in hell? You know, kind of like punishment. They didn't, you know, they're an arhat, but they have to be born in hell. What do you think, Venerable? Venerable says no. Because an arhat is no longer going to take, that's one of the qualities of nirvana, of arhatship. One is no longer reborn in samsara, out of karma and delusion. So that karma has been totally, because of realizing emptiness, totally purified. So in a sense, we're also purifying the winds that can give rise to the discursive minds. Let's say the mind of anger, which is very prevalent in our mind right now, will have a mounting wind. When that mind is not manifest, the mounting wind is probably going to be non-manifest also, of anger. Okay, it has a particular kind of wind associated with it. When we are still vacillating, when we have the tendency of having a chip on our shoulder or being irritable, irritated, that may mean that there's kind of some winds present that can, as soon as we meet an object, as the presence of the wind is there, it can cause the anger to arise very quickly. So that's why we do meditation on purifying the defiled winds, breathing in white light. Imagine breathing out the defiled winds. So that can it could actually have an effect on our consciousness, so that the discursive thoughts that are kind of continuing day by day to have various effects, they can be purified. But that doesn't, that kind of thing doesn't purify the actual seeds. That has to be done through meditation on emptiness. Let's take a little break. We'll come back. Now, let's go a little bit further in text. So we had gotten up to the point in the stages of death, the eighth dissolution. I think we actually mentioned the eighth dissolution last time, right? The clear light. On page 45, it is called the clear light of death and the all empty. What are the four empties called? There's called white apparent or appearance, then red increase, black near attainment, clear light. But in terms of empty, they're called what? Empty, great empty, very empty, and all empty. So on page 45, about 2/3 of the way down, this is called the clear light of death and the all empty, because of being devoid of the 80 conceptions, 80 indicative conceptions, and of appearance, increase, and near attainment, as well as the winds that serve as their mounts. It is actual death. So there may be a difference between death and death state. This is the state of death. So, if you see definitions that death is defined differently, but we'll see, as we've talked about this before. This is the basic truth body. It is not the actual, the truth body means dharmakaya, right? They translate dharmakaya as truth body. So this is the basic. Does that mean we have dharmakaya now? Is that what it's saying? No, that's not what it's saying. This is what can be, this is the basis that can be transformed into the actual dharmakaya, because we try to transform the death, ordinary death, that means the clear light, into the dharmakaya. So this is the state that we're trying to transform into dharmakaya. It has an aspect of that, right? This clear light that can recognize emptiness, so that's similar to the Buddha's omniscient mind, wisdom dharmakaya. Which? So one could say, well, the Buddha nature, is the Buddha nature transform into dharmakaya? Usually in Uttara Tantra, what is the Buddha nature, actual Buddha nature? Dorji is surprising. He knows these things. You guys don't. You think he just says mantras? What is the actual? Take a jab.
Was it the emptiness of our mind?
The emptiness of the mind is the actual Buddha nature, right? Okay. So we talk about two different kinds of Buddha nature: the developmental and the abiding. So the actual Buddha nature is the emptiness of the mind. So does that transform into Buddha's omniscient mind? No, the emptiness doesn't. The emptiness of our mind transforms into what? Which of the Buddha's bodies? The emptiness, it transforms into the nature dharmakaya, the svabhavikakaya. Remember the wisdom, we talk about three bodies. We talk about dharmakaya, sambhogakaya, nirmanakaya. Sambhogakaya and nirmanakaya are both form bodies. Dharmakaya actually can be divided into two. The dharmakaya can be talked about the wisdom dharmakaya and the nature dharmakaya. So we talk about the jnana dharmakaya, the wisdom dharmakaya. That's the omniscient mind. That's a conventional phenomena. And then the emptiness of that mind, the Buddha's mind, is called the svabhavikakaya. So sometimes we talk about four bodies, right? So the emptiness of our mind, the Buddha nature, at the time of Buddhahood becomes the svavavikakaya. So in terms of, remember when I've mentioned to you before, sometimes when we meditate on the clear light nature of our mind, I've said that sometimes His Holiness has said this could be called a conventional Buddha nature. Not the developmental Buddha nature is a little bit different, but in a sense, maybe this clear light, the subtle clear light, is that which will transform into the wisdom Dharmakaya. It's usually not mentioned that way in all of these scriptures, but His Holiness has said one can think like that. So the emptiness of our mind is usually what's called the Buddha nature. And it's that allows our mind to be separated from the adventitious stains, not the advantageous stains. What are the adventitious stains? What does adventitious mean?
We looked it up in the dictionary.
Did you?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
One of the definitions was accidental.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the first definition.
So if you look up did you look it up on the web or in a physical, you looked it on an electronic, physical dictionary? So that's one of the meanings of, but here it doesn't mean kind of accidental. It means something that comes about because of causes and conditions. It's not always there. So you use the word adventitious also in terms of some medical terminology, but here we're talking about adventitious stains. Lubur in Tibetan, I'm not sure what the Sanskrit is. It means something which is not always there by nature. So these delusions are not part of our mind, even though we might think that, okay, when we calm our mind, they're not there. Still, there's the seeds of them, but even the seeds of them are not part of our mind. They can be removed. The nature of the mind is clear light, that which is clear and knowing. And so all of these stains, whether they be the delusions, the manifest delusions or unmanifest delusions, the seeds, the potentials, the imprints, all of these can be eliminated from the mind through various kinds of spiritual practice. So this clear light nature of the mind, perhaps, maybe we could talk about this as being that which transforms into the wisdom Dharmakaya. Certainly the emptiness of our mind is that which transforms into the wisdom, the nature body, the svavavikakaya. Okay? So the vacuity, this is the basic truth body, so-called because it is the basis of purification to be transformed into a truth body, right? It's not actual truth body. You see that in parentheses? So-called, because it is the basis of purification to be transformed into a truth body. Truth body is what we generally call Dharmakaya. It's just Jeffrey Hopkins' way of translating Dharmakaya. The vacuity is called the basic nature body. What does that mean, the vacuity? That means the emptiness. If we were to, well, I'm not sure if this means, and the mind that takes it as its object is called the basic realizational wisdom truth body. Yeah, so this is saying the same thing. Here it's talking about the actual emptiness that's perceived by that mind, the subjective mind. It's not just talking about the gross vacuity or the clarity that's perceived. It's saying that the vacuity is called the basic nature body, the svavavikakaya. So we don't have the svavavikakaya now. We have the Buddha nature. So this is this vacuity of this emptiness of the mind is the Buddha nature, and it can become that it is that which is transformed into the actual nature body, the actual svavavikakaya. And the mind that takes it as its object is called the basic realizational wisdom truth body. So the wisdom Dharmakaya. The basic, it's called basic because although it's not the actual Dharmakaya, the wisdom Dharmakaya, it's the basis for purification into that. Most ordinary humans remain in the clear light for 3 days, whereupon the signs of white and red constituents occur. What's most mean here? Did you look in the 35? What does it say? 35. Losang Lundrup's instructions on stages of generation. Okay, so most people remain in the clear light for 3 days if the body is not disturbed. I think just judging by my friend's passing just a week ago, a couple of days ago, a week ago, last Thursday actually, not a week ago, that it's very hard not to disturb the body in the West. You know, nowadays the mortuary wants to come, people want to kiss the body, embrace the body. So maybe the mind can remain, the clear light can remain for up to 3 days for ordinary beings, but I think generally if the body is disturbed, and certainly if it's brought to the mortuary, not only just juggling along on the road, even if you're in a nice cushy Cadillac hearse or whatever, but when they start sticking needles in you and so forth, I don't think the mind remains any longer. A little blood and phlegm emerge from the nose and or sexual organ, these being the unrefined portions of the drops that have dissolved at the heart. Remember we talked about this before? However, in cases where the physical constituents have been severely consumed by disease, the signs of the red and white constituents do not occur no matter how many days pass. Such persons might not remain in the clear light for even a day. So even if you don't jostle the body, if they've had a very severe disease, the mind might leave before 3 days from the clear light state. Also, it is said that yogis with higher and lower realizations can mix the clear light with the truth body and remain in this for a greater or lesser number of extra days. So there's some stories of I think one of the Panchen Lamas who passed away, he passed away in China, and his holy body was carried back on a palanquin to Lhasa, and he remained in the clear light. This is not like ordinary beings like us. Remained in the clear light for whatever number of weeks or months it took to carry the body from China back to Lhasa. Also, I think I've mentioned the story before. I remember Lama used to tell the story of when the monks were in Baksa, in the camp that had formerly been a concentration camp that the British Raj had incarcerated Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi, I think, for some time. It's up in the northeast of India, in very humid jungle, hot. And usually there was a law that if a person died, the police had to be notified and the corpse had to be removed within hours because it would generally begin to putrefy very quickly. Again, probably because the bodies were jostled in some way, and the clear light mind did not remain. So one tulku, I think, passed away, and the police found out, and they came to take the corpse, and the monks said, "Don't take him. He's meditating. He won't begin to decompose." And they said, "Yeah, right. Look at this, whatever the temperature was, and it's humid." And so they waited and waited, and the body didn't decompose. And it took several days. The body remained, there was no breathing. The body was, obviously, from a Western perspective, dead. The person was dead. But from the Buddhist perspective, they were in the state of death, the clear light of death. And they remained for many days in meditation. And then when there were some signs that the consciousness had left, then the body began to decompose like that. So here's some clarifications. It says, dissolution. With respect to the way that the minds of appearance, increase, and near attainment dissolve. Remember when we were talking about dissolving? The earth element dissolves into the water element. It didn't mean that like you get some kind of soupy mud, right? You might think, the earth element's dissolving into the water element. What does that mean? The airs that support the earth element, the earth constituent within our being, they begin to absorb into the heart chakra. And the water element is in ascendancy. That's what is temporarily strongest. And so it's said, it's just the terminology that earth dissolves into water. Here, when the white, red, and black visions appear, and they dissolve rather, the capacity of the former mind ceases, and the latter becomes more manifest. That's what's meant by dissolving, the same way as before. This is called the dissolution of the former into the latter, but it is not that the former becomes the nature of the latter, right? It's not when the earth dissolves into the water, it's not earth becomes water, or it becomes one heap. You understand, right? Autumn sky. What's it talking about autumn sky? It's just talking about these different terms, clarifying what they mean. The reason why an autumn sky is used in the example is that the summer rains, the monsoon in India, they suppress well the rising of dust. Here says earth particles. So generally, when the rains come, they're often in the sky, there's some kind of particulate matter. It doesn't necessarily mean only from the earth particles that have come up, but what else can they occur from? Burning of fuels and, dust and other kinds of things. Dust that comes from volcanoes and other kinds of things. Whatever particles there are in the sky, it suppresses well the rising of these particles into the intermediate space, the rains. They sort of cleanses the sky like that. And the sky is free from the obstructions of clouds. How come? It's the monsoon's over, sky, there's less humidity, there's no clouds. Since a composite of these two features occurs frequently with great clarity during the autumn, an autumn sky is used in the example. That's not the only time that the sky has this kind of clarity, but that gives you an idea. Also, just as space is a vacuity, an empty, it's kind of emptiness, doesn't mean the meaning of shunyata, but a vacuity that is the mere negation of coarse obstructive contact. That's the meaning of space, right? The absence of obstructing contact. That's the definition of space. So, appearances of coarse conceptuality have disappeared for those minds. Which minds? The minds of white appearance, red increase, and black entertainment, right? And an appearance of vacuity dawns during the four empties. Empty, very empty, great empty, and all empty. Also the final clear light, all of those empties. Although there's a vibration of white light in the white appearance, it's still called empty. So it's an emptiness or a lack of, instead of lack of obstructive contact, it's a lack of these conceptual minds. In these two respects, the modes of appearance in those four states are similar to an autumn sky, and so it is used as an example. It is not that the appearances of the sky and so forth dawn on these occasions. That's pretty clear, right? All right? Gross and subtle winds. Question. If prior to the mind of appearance, the 80 indicative conceptions as well as the winds that serve as their mounts, here this is plural, have dissolved, is it not true that there would be no winds to dissolve at the times of appearance, increase, and near attainment? Do you understand the question? What do you think, Eric? What's the question saying?
Right.
Substance and the winds that the amounts are dissolved, there is nothing else to be dissolved.
Yeah, it sounds like
If all the gross winds have dissolved, what's left to dissolve? How can there be anything? There should just be just one thing after that. Why is there still some stages? Well, that's not the only winds. There's also subtle winds. So, it says, in answer, it says, in general, winds are of many types, gross and subtle. Thus, although the gross have finished dissolving, the subtle still exist, and they still have to dissolve. They still have to be absorbed into the heart. Therefore, the time when only subtle winds act as a basis of consciousness occurs from the dissolving of the wind from among the four elements into appearance. At that, once from that time, when that's from the point at which that's already dissolved, starting after it's dissolved, up until the dissolving of near attainment into clear light, there are subtle winds present. Why doesn't it say? Why does it say until the dissolving of near attainment into clear light? Why doesn't it say until the clear light? Because the clear light is an experience of the very subtle. There's sort of three levels of wind. The gross winds, the subtle, which are these, the mounts of the white, red, and black appearances. The white appearance, the red increase, the black near attainment. And then the subtlemost wind is what's present at the clear light. So that's even a different level of subtlety, because you've already gone into this, after the second part of the black near attainment, sort of fallen into a non-mindful state, and then the clear light arises. Then, here, okay, yes.
From acts as a basis of consciousness occurs from the dissolving of wind into appearance, but doesn't the 80 indicative aren't the 80 indicative conceptions between wind and appearance?
No? You said no?
The most subtle mind begins at the moment of the 80 conceptions, right?
That's not the most subtle mind, no.
Not the most subtle, I mean the subtle consciousness.
Here it says, what do we usually say wind dissolves into?
No, wind dissolves into consciousness. Consciousness dissolves into...
That's how usually they say, right? So this is just talking about it in general, from that point, when we talk about the four elements, because that wind is the mount of the gross minds, and these 80 indicative conceptions also have their mounting winds. Those are still going to be on the gross level. From the point, let's take it from the other point of view. From the beginning of the beginning of the white appearance until the end of the black near attainment, that period is one in which there are only subtle winds acting as the basis of consciousness. The 80 indicative conceptions still have somewhat gross minds, somewhat gross winds that act as their mounts, right? Let's go back to page 38. After the four elements dissolve, the five phenomena on the level of the aggregate of consciousness must dawn in stages. These five are the mind of the 80 indicative conceptions, the mind of radiant white appearance, the mind of radiant red increase, and the mind of black radiant near attainment, and the mind of clear light of death. So that doesn't explain it exactly there, but it's said that these 80 indicative conceptions have as their mounting winds. They're of a grosser variety than the mounting winds of the white, red, and black appearances. Why? You remember why? Because they're called indicative because they don't dissolve. They've dissolved before the white appearance, and of course before the red increase and the black near attainment. They've already dissolved, but because there's three levels of strength of their mounting winds, they serve to indicate that there are three levels of subtlety of winds of the white appearance, red increase, black near attainment, right? So they're already dissolved at the time of the white appearance. All the gross winds are. So now vacuity and emptiness. So we're using a different, he's using, usually they might sound like synonyms, but if we talk about here vacuity and shunyata, shunyata meaning the actual emptiness or true existence, that's what's meant by emptiness here. During the four empties, what are the four empties? The four appearances, like the white appearance, red increase, black near attainment, and then the clear light, right? During the four empties, coarse conventional appearances vanish for the mind. Coarse or gross conventional appearances vanish for the mind. Does that mean there's no conventional appearances for the mind? No, it doesn't mean that. There's still conventional. In fact, if there was not conventional appearance, then you would be perceiving emptiness. But there's still, even for that clear light of death, there still is the appearance of true existence. The how do I say? The appearance of the clear light to that mind is one which appears to that mind to be truly existent. It's only by recalling the meaning of emptiness that one can overcome that. During the four empties, coarse conventional appearances vanish for the mind due to the fact that these minds, these four empties, as well as the appearance of objects, have become more subtle than the former minds and objects. Okay? With these, a vacuity dawns, but it is not a case of taking emptiness as an object of mind. A vacuity dawns, just as like in the white appearance, the red increase, the black near attainment. There is we use the word kind of empty. Empty appears to the mind, like empty space, but still pervaded by a white light, let's say, or a red light, or a blackish, diminishing of illumination, sort of losing of mindfulness. Although these are empty of the gross conceptual minds that were present before and other gross appearances, this is not the meaning of emptiness. This is not a case of the mind taking emptiness as its object. On these occasions, it is only appearances of true existence that arise to an ordinary being who has not cultivated the path. So that's what we were trying to do in our meditation at the beginning of class, when we were imagining the death evolution, trying to use each of those grosser stages to meditate on emptiness, so that when we got to the white, red, and black appearances, there could be a continuity of mindfulness to transform that appearance, which is one of true existence, into the meaning of emptiness, so that what would be appearing to the mind would be the meaning of emptiness.
Subtle, that it's more easy to get to emptiness? Is that why the appearance is more subtle?
Unless it's more easy to get to emptiness. It's not, there's a lack of conceptuality and any kind of other disturbing things. Like say if you were to a meditator, yogi or yogini, who's able to cultivate the clear light in meditation, they can remain in that for some period of time, and there's no thought, I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch. Oh boy, I could really do with peanut butter cookie or something, or I wonder what video is on TV tonight. There's not going to be any kind of conceptual thoughts arising, for one thing. Okay, so that's the gross. There's not going to be gross conceptuality. So that aids in the meditation. Also, the aspect of vacuity is similar in aspect to the appearance of emptiness, to a wisdom consciousness that's apprehending emptiness, right? The aspect of vacuity, even though at first has some white tinge and red appearance and so forth, red increase. So, because the subtlemost clear light mind at the time of death, we call it clear light. It's not the actual clear light, as comes clear in these clarifications. Because that is totally concentrated, it's not going to have any kind of other kinds of distractions, and it has an aspect of empty, and it can become a direct realization at first. Also, although there's no conceptuality, it can still know, it can remember the meaning of emptiness, which is conceptual. It still can be a conceptual mind. It's not only a non-conceptual mind, the clear light of death. It still can recall that this appearance is like the appearance of emptiness, and know emptiness conceptually. That's called what? The example clear light, or as Jeffrey calls, the metaphorical clear light. And if trained, it can actually realize emptiness directly through that kind of habituation. So that's why because that subtlemost mind, if you leave an imprint in that subtlemost mind of meditation on emptiness, that's going to have through all your lifetimes, there will be that kind of imprint. It's not going to be something that's going to be easily forgotten. You're training on that very, very subtle level. So ordinary beings experience the clear light of death in the manner of its appearing without being ascertained. Remember, that's the terminology we use for inattentive, what we called inattentive perception. A consciousness to which an object appears, but the object is not ascertained. It is, as I say, ordinary beings experience the clear light of death in the manner of its appearing without being ascertained, not with a mind of ascertainment. Ordinary beings don't ascertain, aren't even be able to remember the clear light of death. So even to remember the clear light of death, even if you can't join it with emptiness, that still already puts you far above the ordinary state, ordinary beings. Then what's meant by mother and son clear lights? How come the father clear light is not mentioned here? It's always mother and, well, son at least. It is not mother and daughter. I don't know. At least they give some. Anyway, I'm joking. The clear light of death is the mother clear light, whereas that which dawns through the power of meditation during sleep and the waking state while on the spiritual path, that is to say, while in meditation, say if you're doing tumo or something, or the Vajra recitation, and you can bring the airs into the central channel and cause the clear light to manifest due to spiritual practices, that's called the sun clear light. Okay? Meditation that mixes these two during the clear light of death is called mixing of the mother and sun clear lights. So does the sun clear light necessarily realize emptiness? What do you think, Mark? Does the sun clear light, oh, you were thinking something else. You were in the clear light. Does the sun clear light necessarily realize emptiness?
The mother clear light,
It says, is the actual clear light of death, right? Is the sun clear light necessarily realize emptiness? No, because the sun clear light also appears at the time of, say, sleep and so forth. It's that what occurs during this lifetime when the winds have not inexorably, finally absorbed into the subtle wind at the heart, but can come out again. So I think I may be wrong, but I think the sun clear light, say for instance, if you train to recognize the clear light, even if you can't grasp that to the meaning of emptiness, then at the time of death you can at least ascertain, you can be aware of the clear light at the time of death, but you're not necessarily going to be able to recognize that clear light of death, the mother clear light, as the meaning of emptiness, unless you've trained to recognize the sun clear light in the meditation state as the meaning of emptiness. So that's what the completion stage is about, or the generation stage also, to try to recognize, even if you simulate it, first of all in the generation stage, and finally create it in the completion stage, the manifesting of this clear light mind. You try to train to use that sun clear light to realize emptiness. Then when you mix that sun clear light with the mother clear light at the time of death, then you can be using it to realize emptiness, the mother clear light. Question: is the clear light of death in general a fully qualified clear light? What do you say, without looking? You say yes. Although the mother and sun clear lights that are mixed and stabilized within the view of emptiness, so this is talking about one who's used the sun clear light to realize emptiness, and then at the time of death mixes it with the mother clear light, so that the mother clear light, that final clear light of death, is realizing emptiness. When that's done by a yogi, those kinds of clear lights are fully qualified clear light. The clear light of death that whereas on the other hand, the clear light of death that dawns for an ordinary being, not by the power of meditation, but of its own accord, is a case of imputing the name clear light to just a stoppage of gross dualistic appearance. It is not fully qualified. It is not the actual one. Okay, it's not actual clear light. So I remember one of our colleagues, one of our contemporaries, who was one of our peers, who's a good meditator, and talked about, mentioned to me his experience of manifesting clear light. And I mentioned this to Lama Zopa Rinpoche as kind of a praise of this person, and Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that's not actual clear light. So we weren't thinking, we were just thinking manifesting, if you can bring the airs in the central channel and be aware of that's not a fully qualified clear light. Fully qualified clear light is when you're able to use that to meditate on emptiness. That's the real, actual meaning of clear light. Like say, for instance, someone who's taken the bodhisattva vow, are they an actual bodhisattva? Are they fully qualified bodhisattva? Sometimes people say they're bodhisattva. I've taken the bodhisattva vow. Some traditions they talk about. So this word fully qualified, I think, is generally we say sanipa. That means like has the full definition. A person who takes the bodhisattva vow but has not generated bodhicitta, spontaneous bodhicitta, is not a fully qualified bodhisattva. So the same thing. You could call, in some circumstances, you might label them a bodhisattva, not an actual bodhisattva. So this clear light of death, unless that subjective mind is apprehending emptiness, that's not the actual meaning of clear light in the tantras when they talk about the clear light. That's just called clear light because it is something that has the, is absent of, is a devoid of gross dualistic appearances and so forth. Yeah.
Just to clarify for me, if I understand this right, at the point of clear light of death, or maybe even back at black near attainment, gross duality ceases, but we still maintain a subtle duality?
At what point?
Well, at the clear light of death, or maybe also back at the black near attainment. But anyway, somewhere in there it stopped. But the gross duality sort of out of our control stops, where a subtle duality remains.
Here, again, you have to be careful. The word dualistic appearance has many different levels of meaning, and it's not clarified here what's meant. Generally, when we talk about dualistic appearance in terms of Tantra and emptiness, it means a mind to which there is the appearance of conventionality. So here when it says gross dualistic appearances cease, that means gross conventional appearances have ceased. There's no gross conventional appearances, but the clear light to that dying person still appears to be truly existent, which is a conventional appearance. Because it can only be one or the other. It can only be either a conventional appearance or an ultimate appearance, the appearance of ultimate truth or the appearance of conventional truth. So if that subtlemost mind is not trained to realize emptiness, what is appearing to it is conventional truth, dualistic appearance. It's a subtle dualistic appearance. Notice here it says it is a case of imputing the name clear light to just a stoppage of gross dualistic appearances. So I think you have to understand dualistic appearances here as meaning the appearance of conventional appearance. Because in Tantra and in talking about emptiness, that's generally what we're talking about, dualistic appearance, is the appearance which is not apprehending emptiness.
My question, if I'm going to train my mind to recognize this clear light of death is emptiness, I need to do that at the most subtle level of my mind.
In order to do it at the most subtle level of mind, because there's no ability to have gross conceptualization or analysis at that point. If you waited until that point to analyze emptiness, you wouldn't be able to do it. So you have to start from the point, from the waking state, meditate on emptiness. And then when you simulate in the generation stage or in the completion stage, actually recognize the absorption of the earth element. And you notice at that point there is a certain period of time when the mind has a certain level of subtlety at which there's the mirage-like vision. Use that mind then, rather than just worrying and doing other things, meditate on emptiness. Make a firm determination. At the time of death, I will remember emptiness. At the clear light of death. And of course in Tantra one then thinks of other things too, bliss and other things. But at the time of death, I must recognize that state as the meaning of emptiness. So by the force of your motivation, just as when, was it Mark or Frank was talking to Dorji before about a prayer to do at the time of sleep, making that to remember your dream, to make a firm resolution that has a very strong effect, a strong, resolve. Like my dad during the Depression said, when he had to get up early in the morning, he said he just decided, I have to get up at 4:30, and even before the alarm clock went off, it'd be like 4:29 and a half, he would wake up. I don't know if you have that, like you have to get up for the airplane. Sometimes you get up because of that strong resolve. Even you don't, I don't know, maybe you have an internal clock, maybe maybe they put a chip in you that's through the internet, I don't know, anyway. But anyway, you get up. And so the same thing, but that force of resolve, that's one of the things that you're going to recognize it. But of course, you have to have something to remember. It's not just enough to say, I'm going to remember emptiness at the time of clear light. And at the time of clear light, you say, emptiness. I mean, you don't say, but you try to remember emptiness, but there's no memory of emptiness because you never realized it. You actually have to meditate on emptiness and realize it. So you try to bring that in stages. As the earth element absorbs, you meditate on emptiness. And you try to recall what just took place before, what's coming next, keep mind very, very clear. Then when the water element absorbs, again, when that smoke appearance occurs, you use that subtler consciousness. Let go of the appearance of the smoke. Maybe you can meditate on the emptiness of the smoke. Sometimes it's said in this various practices, or you can use it to meditate on some other aspect of emptiness. The mind is still fairly gross at this time. And that emptiness that you're bringing very close now, the wisdom of emptiness, you're bringing very close to the clear light, closer and closer, until when you get to the 80 indicative, the absorption of the 80 indicative conceptions, you're not going to be able to analyze any longer. So during the white, red, and black appearances, although in generation stage you still, maybe you meditate, oh, this white appearance is not truly existent, you might use some conceptuality. At the time of the actual white appearance, it's going to be a case of just recalling by the force of that, the juxtaposition just before that at the absorption of the air element, that you, with that subtle mind, you were trying to meditate on emptiness. And now remembering it by the force of resolve and by the force of that juxtaposition, the continuity, then bringing that to the red appearance, red increase, and the black near attainment. And then by that sort of continuity, then when the clear light appears, you can recognize that clear light. I mean, again, you don't use words, but there will be a mindfulness that recognizes this as what you have, it has the same aspect as the emptiness, of vacuity. But now you will graft it with the meaning of emptiness. So it's really, understanding this, I think, really gives some sense to the practice of the generation stage and the completion stage. Even though the generation stage is not actually withdrawing the winds in, it's ripening the mind to be able to practice the completion stage so that these things will be recognized at that time. In general, clear light is of two types. The objective clear light, that is the subtle emptiness of inherent existence. This is talking about actual clear light, right? The actual, when we talked about fully qualified clear light is of two types. The objective clear light, that means emptiness, and the subjective clear light, that is the wisdom consciousness realizing this emptiness. So in some of the traditions, this gets into a lot of interesting discussion if you have a chance to investigate, say, the Dzogchen teachings. Dorji, have you read about Dzogchen? What are you doing? Are you drawing me with hair on? What is that? You're doodling. This class is like, it's like kindergarten class something. Don and it's joking, talking, and then Dorji drawing pictures.
Sorry.
Okay. Have you studied Dzogchen? Some Dzogchen?
Maybe just read something about it.
Okay, your teachers are Sakya and
My two main
Karma,
teachers
Kargyu.
are Nyingma and Sakya.
Okay, so you haven't had a chance to. Has anyone had studied the Dzogchen? Mark, have you studied some Dzogchen? You haven't?
I did the year of the stream one of the Soquel Rinpoche's work.
Mm-hmm. It's probably not yet talking about Dzogchen, it's just the beginning, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
close
just
up. Okay.
So in Dzogchen, sometimes His Holiness has said that there is a method within the Nyingma tradition that's been preserved of causing the subtle mind to manifest through a stage of non-conceptualization. But there's the terminology, and sometimes it's said that this is emptiness, that this clear light is emptiness, just the same way as in some of the Kargyu presentations of the Mahamudra. Generally, from the Gelugpa position point of view and in His Holiness's point of view, this is just the vacuity that we're talking about here that appears naturally to the mind. You could say the clear light nature of the mind when we talk about the gross mind and the subtle clear light nature, which is still not the meaning of emptiness, just that it's called clear light or empty because it's empty of gross dualistic appearances. It still has a conventional appearance to the mind. So there's a lot of debate about this and how to understand. They sometimes talk about the clear light nature of the mind is emptiness. So generally we would say the subjective mind that's realizing emptiness, although its nature, its ultimate nature is emptiness, it's not emptiness itself. It's a conventional phenomena. The conventional mind that's realizing emptiness itself is a conventional phenomena. When it talks about the subjective mind and the objective mind, right? The subjective mind is a conventional phenomena. Of course, it has emptiness as its ultimate nature, but it is a conventional phenomena. What it's realizing, perhaps if it's meditating on the emptiness of itself, is it's its own emptiness. So you have to read some of the presentations of Dzogchen to appreciate what's being said there. Sometimes His Holiness said that it would be very, very beneficial for the practitioners of Dzogchen to train in the view of emptiness that Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and the great pundits of India had preserved, because it's that same view that we practice in the sutra system that has to be used at the time of clear light too in Tantra. It's not as though that's just the sutra path and this is something else. You can realize emptiness just by observing the mind, or it just dawns. It's not that way, His Holiness says. So then in conclusion, as will be explained in chapter 4, he says, these stages of death are brought within the path. Okay, these stages of death. So it's bringing up to death, meaning the actual death is the clear light. They're brought within the path, they're carried to the path by the practice of taking death as the truth body in the stages of generation and completion, the completion stage, generation stage of Highest Yoga Tantra, Highest Yoga Mantra. They are also the main bases of purification by means of the metaphoric and actual clear lights. So that metaphoric is what we call example clear light, pe osel, actual clear light, or meaning clear light, is the metaphoric clear light or example clear light is the subtlemost subjective clear light mind realizing emptiness via a mental image. Remember, it still has dualistic appearances, right? Even before that, even before you have an example of even before the example clear light, it's only said to be free of gross dualistic appearances. It still has an appearance, the clear light that's appearing to it appears to be truly existent. So if you can use that to recall the mental image of emptiness, that's what's called the example clear light. And if later you can use that subjective clear light mind to realize emptiness directly without a mental image, because that subtle clear light mind is capable of realizing things directly, just as our gross mind is able to realize things directly, that's called the meaning clear light. So those are the different stages in Tantra. Those are the different stages. You have to first realize the example or metaphoric clear light via a mental image. So it's not the actual one. It's kind of an example or a metaphor of the actual clear light. And then the actual clear light, which is the meaning clear light.
A question about the terminology here. It says, the stages of death are brought within the path by the practice of taking death as the truth body in the stages of generation and completion. What does it mean, taking death as the truth body?
So what was the death that we're talking about here? The impure death, the actual impure death we're talking about is the clear light of death. So taking that and taking it as the truth body. So recognizing, like say at the time of, even in the generation stage, first of all, because it says by the generation and completion stage, the generation stage where you're just simulating this, just imagining it like we were doing. And when the clear light comes, even conceptualizing to yourself, although at that time you couldn't say this, you could say, this is the actual, now I've attained the Dharmakaya. This is the Dharmakaya. It means by the completion stage, the mother clear light only takes place at death. So this is just the sun clear light you're talking about, say in the meditation. So just recognizing that clear light, using it to meditate on emptiness, even if it's just all in imagination, that's taking the death, which is that clear light, as the truth body. It is carrying it or taking it into, transforming it eventually, although it's not the actual Dharmakaya yet, you practice in that way. It's like bringing also another feature of Tantra is bringing the eventual result that will take place in the future, rather than thinking it's all the way off in the future, bringing it into the present. It's called, sometimes we call Tantra the resultant vehicle, and Sutra the causal vehicle. Have you ever heard that terminology? So it's another aspect of thinking, like say for instance, as you recognize this is the meaning of emptiness, you think, the ordinary way I think of myself, this is just in the generation stage, because in actual completion stage, when you actually have brought the airs in the central channel, there's no ability to conceptualize at this time, right? To think like this, that. But here you're thinking, the way I usually think of myself as Frank or Don or Mark or whatever is completely erroneous. I'm grasping to something that doesn't exist at all. It's totally wrong. So there's a great validity. There's a more true to impute myself upon this. This is who I actually am. I am the Dharmakaya that's actually realizing emptiness directly. Bringing that, because this is something that will happen in the future. It's something which is actually, in some ways, more true than what we ordinarily think of ourselves. So there's some mantras that are said, the mantra that's said at that time in the sadhana sometimes is, Om Shunyata Jnana. Venerable, do you know the mantra? Om Shunyata Jnana. What? Oh, good. You say hum. Before you said hum. Yeah. Okay. Om Shunyata Jnana Vajra Svabhava Atmako Ham. Atmako means Atmaka Aham. In Sanskrit, the sandhi, the joining of those letters. Aham means I. I am the Atmaka, the nature. It's kind of like Atma or self. I am the nature Say Om Shunyata Jnana. Shunyata Jnana means what? Wisdom of emptiness. Shunyata is emptiness. Jnana means exalted wisdom, like Yeshe or Jnana. Om Shunyata Jnana Vajrasvabhava. Vajrasvabhava means what? Vajra nature, like Om Svabhava Shuddha. Svabhava means the nature. Om Shunyata Jnana Vajrasvabhava Atmako Ham. I am the nature of this indestructible, I am the essence of this indestructible nature that realizes emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness. So that's a mantra that one says in the sadhanas sometimes. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that mantra will be remembered sometime, I don't know. But anyway, it leaves some imprint in the mind. So at that point, taking the death as the Dharmakaya means recognizing the death, ordinary death, the clear light. Because remember last time we talked about what is death in this case. The death state is the clear light. Taking that as the Dharmakaya, trying to recognize that as developing the divine pride that I am the Dharmakaya, even though we're not Dharmakaya now. But what you think you are now is completely wrong. So this is actually more right than what you usually think of yourself. This is kind of one of the meanings of taking death as the Dharmakaya. Therefore, it is very important to form a good understanding of them. They are the main basis of purification by means of the metaphoric and actual clear lights. Therefore, it is very important to form a good understanding of them. They meaning what? The stages of the taking death as the truth body. Okay? So for auspiciousness, Georgie, do we have a couple minutes? Let's begin the stages of the bardo. Bardo is what Tibetans say for intermediate state, right? Dharma means in between. Bardo means the state in between. Have you heard of the Bardo Todal? What is the Bardo Todal?
The deceased through the 49 days.
Yeah, that's how can you guide the deceased in the 49 days? There's not, but the Bardo being can't hear you, right? Supposedly it's called Bardo Todal. Sometimes they call it Tibetan Book of the Dead. Remember we were talking about that before. It actually is called liberation through hearing. Liberation in the Bardo through hearing mainly means while the person is still alive and you're reminding them at the time of death, just like we try to remind ourselves of virtuous thoughts and so forth, so that at the time of death we can die with a mind without grasping, with the mind of bodhicitta if possible. So you remind a person in that text of a particular tantric observation that they might have practiced during the lifetime. If they haven't had that empowerment and initiation, it doesn't necessarily, maybe it leaves some imprint to practice it in the future, but that doesn't necessarily help them now. You're not going to be leading them in the Bardo. In the Bardo, they're not going to be able to hear you. So anyway, that's the same word Bardo that we use in Tibetan. At the end of howsoever long the mind of clear light abides without any movement, at the end of that, there's going to be a slight movement. That means the subtlemost wind will have a movement, that is, and the mind will quiver. This initiates the rising from the clear light. At this point, the very subtle wind and mind leave the opened drop of the white and red constituents at the heart and pass outside. So it leaves from the heart, but it can leave from the heart, it leaves some other orifice of the body. The body is left and the body of the intermediate state, or Bardo, is established. Simultaneously, the white constituent of the heart descends and emerges from the point of the male or female sign, male-female sexual organ, while the red constituent rises and emerges from the nose. The wind that serves as the mount of the clear light of death and has the 5 lights, the 5 colors, white, red, blue, yellow, and green, acts as the substantial cause of the Bardo body. So the subtlemost wind acts as the substantial cause of the Bardo body. The subtlemost mind of clear light acts as the substantial cause of the Bardo mind. They both act, the subtle wind also acts as a cooperative cause of the mind. But the substantial cause, you know the difference between substantial cause and cooperative cause. We'll talk next time. And the subtle mind acts as the substantial cause of the Bardo mind, but also the cooperative cause of the Bardo body. So why don't you do a little research about that next time? And we'll end right here, a little dedication. So that which created the strength of the virtue was the motivation at the beginning. The action of listening, the whole action, if it was done with mindfulness and, attended properly, that was the correct, very strong action in the middle. At the end, after the karma has been dedicated, had been created, we try to dedicate it. So the karma has been created, virtue, but it may not itself ripen in ways that we wish. So we have to dedicate it, besides the motivation at the beginning, we try to dedicate it now. Very strong wish. May this effort that I put in creating this karma, a virtuous karma, may it give rise to not just mundane happiness and cyclic existence, but may it become the cause of my spiritual realization up to enlightenment, so that from that state I can overcome all my faults, being overcome from all my faults, having developed all good qualities, I can spontaneously, effortlessly benefit all sentient beings, lead them as I'm being led by my gurus out of suffering in the most quick way into everlasting blissful happiness. Due to these merits, in other words, may I quickly attain enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. And then seal that within the emptiness of the three spheres.